It's that time of the week. I'm feeling pretty pumped up. Can't wait to chat to you all.
It's time for another show from Colin Jones, the Reasonable Adventurer. Time for you to take another step towards creating your own opportunities for satisfaction.
And it is a huge welcome to you all to episode 93 of the Reasonable Adventurer. I hope you're all well. I hope you've had a fantastic week. And I hope you've been finding time to reflect. I had my first class for the semester this week, and it was great to be able to have those conversations with students where I was talking about the potential power of their reflections and the opportunities for them to actually go beyond thinking about content, but thinking about who they are relative to that content and the experiences that they might be having. So that's really like an opportunity to sort of just get your priorities straightened. You know, you can drift, I think, when you have this big long gap between one class and the next, and something that you might be doing on a day-to-day basis with your sort of student cohorts, and all of a sudden that sort of stops in your life for a few weeks, and then you get that first class and it's almost like you click back into a groove, yeah? And it really reminded me about some of the issues that I've been talking about in the last few shows. And I really do feel like, you know, I've talked in the past few weeks about this sort of feeling like I have more time but being less productive. And I was talking to somebody on a social situation during the week, and I said it's almost like, you know, the old record players, you could play the record on 33 or 45 or even 78. Well, if we just go with the most common previous ones, and you sort of think, well, I've gone from being on 45 and for the last year I've been on 33. So it's great. Life seems slower in one sense. There's more time, right? Less classes to teach, less travel. But then maybe you don't realise that you've actually gone into this sort of slower pace overall in life, right? And so the week starting with a class was a great way to sort of recognise the need to sort of get back into that sync, you know, to sort of go up a gear. And I think that's what's needed. I think that's a big part of the challenge. But today's show, I want to talk about defining the terms of your life. We've talked about this in the past in relation to other things. We've talked about, you know, how you might actually determine what is success in your life, right, as an example. But in terms of your priorities and the actual focus of what you want to achieve, right, and what you should be achieving, yeah, not what just you want to achieve, but what you should be achieving, and maybe even what you can achieve. This notion of defining your own terms. So let me tell you a quick story. So my son is mad about Australian rules football. And he loves playing it, loves watching it, you know, dreams of a future life somewhere in and around AFL football. When we moved here from Tasmania, one of the key challenges was making sure that he actually had access to a football club, that he could continue that dream and he could continue the enjoyment he gets from footy. And so we found a football club, and we got lucky. We got in amongst a really great group of people. He made lots of friends, and they had a great year. In fact, they won the premiership last year, which was a fantastic experience for all the kids. Now, in sort of putting something into his own development, he's put his hand up to be involved in several development squads. And so this week, they had the inter-school, so the under-15 region squad, and they'd pick a group of boys from that who'd then go and play some other under-15 kids in the region next door and another one somewhere else. And he didn't make the team, and he wasn't disappointed because he knew he could sense the gap between where he's actually at with relative to those other kids. There's plenty of kids, 120 kids trying to get into a team of 22. And, you know, you see you're surrounded by 40 kids who are doing real good stuff. But the very next day, he got a phone call from the AFL saying, hey, congratulations, you've made the Queensland All Nations team. and just explain that simply. If you have a parent who's not born in Australia and not from an English-speaking country, the AFL right across Australia brings together the states, in his case Queensland, to play against the other states in an under-15 All-Nations Cup. So it's bringing all that, it's trying to harness that diversity and promote the game to that diversity. So, he goes from not being able to make a regional team within his city to making the state team based on this. And, he's obviously really excited about that, and we're very proud of him. But it's interesting because he's been able to achieve this because he's been able to, by luck, define the nature of his potential selection. That is, he has a mum who was born outside Australia in a non-English speaking country. It gives him an advantage in terms of this particular team. Now, did he play to his strengths? Well, he was invited to try it for the team, and he and one of his mates took a fairly long journey to go up and do this trial. So, the old saying, 80% of success is turning up. But it made me think, and reflect on what had happened to him and being so happy for him. And I thought, I'm not so sure in this little rut I've been in that I've actually been accurately defining the terms for my success. I've actually mostly been doing the opposite. With all this extra time that I've had more time for reading, more time for thinking, and I can't help but think I've had more time to be drawn towards a more challenging space to try and achieve the acceptance of some of my thinking and obviously subsequent publications. If I was to define the nature of the terms of where I wanted to best compete, where I think I can get the best bang for my buck, it would actually be about writing about entrepreneurship education and enterprise education and personal transformation and personal development and a lot of those issues which are quite synonymous with the reasonable adventurer. So that's not to say that the other areas aren't, because obviously firm survival and situation analysis and environmental interaction, all those particular things all do relate as well. And so it got me thinking, and then I had a conversation with one of our sort of global friends, Norris Kruger, and through this conversation it was again reminding me that there are other crazy people out there like me who are interested in things at a different level of depth to other people, and it's not just semantics. They're trying to actually make sense of how we can better understand the field of entrepreneurship education. And that got me excited and thinking, maybe I should do that. And then I thought, wow, and then there's these other couple of issues here which are really important to me as well, and that I have an opinion that I want to share right now. And I actually don't need to wait for anyone else to share those opinions. I can just write the paper, and hopefully it gets published, obviously. And then that made me think, okay, so have I just missed an obvious trick here? Have I forgot to define my own terms in terms of how I want to play the game? Because it's easy to look at someone else's rules and in a different environment to think, okay, up here everyone's got higher standards, so they want to play the game at this level. And that's fine. But do you need to play the game at that level? So think around you. Think around your world, the space that you're in. When you think about how you're demonstrating your worth, when you think about how you're demonstrating your value to people, are you doing it by trying to reach for something which is always a strain? Could you actually demonstrate your worth just by knocking off some low-hanging fruit somewhere? Yeah? If the particular output is you've helped people, does it matter who you help? Or have you got to help a particular type of people, right? Or in a particular type of way? So I think this is an interesting area for us to reflect on in terms of to what extent are we actually defining our own terms? To what extent are we actually being sort of lured into playing a game which might not be to our total advantage, right? So it may be a game that no one would condemn us for playing. But at the same time, it may be a game that it's not that it's too hard for us to play. It's just that some of the odds are stacked against us, right? And that maybe the cost of playing the game is quite high. In my world, maybe I have to spend 6 months writing a paper to get it to that absolute state where it's really, really good, versus actually I could spend a few weeks writing a paper and actually still hit a mark which, in a ranking of journals might be considered to be equivalent, right? Without actually comparing specific journals. So, I'm quite excited by this because, one, it brings me back to the recognition that there are lots and lots of education journals I could be targeting, and there are lots of people out there that I know that I could be writing papers with, right? And so I do feel like I've missed a trick over the last 6 months because I've been so excited about my firm survival stuff and my book that I figured, well, I must have to crank that back up because, maybe people don't or aren't as interested in my work on education. But at the end of the day, I am an educator and I am supposed to be contributing to the development of that field. So why don't I just define my own terms? Why don't I just crank up and get moving in that space? It seems like it would be a much more logical move for me to actually do such a thing. What do you think? Does it make sense to try and play to your immediate strengths? I can see a potential strength building in another area, but it's still building, right? And if you can recognize that, you might like your thinking, you might like your abilities, but maybe not everyone does to the same extent that you do. And from that perspective, maybe it is worthwhile trying to actually develop this up in a different way. So anyway, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm thinking. I'm not sure how that all plays through in your own situation. I'm not sure if you can find a parallel to this where you're actually being sort of lured into playing the game on other people's terms when you could actually be playing it on your terms and still achieving, a comparable outcome, so to speak, in terms of how your time and effort is being valued or ranked. So something for us to think about. Looking forward to chatting next time. Cheerio.